How's it going, people? Sam and Slabby here, and this is part 3 of Runescape Lore Heroes. So this episode we're carrying on with the legend of Arrav, and this is the third and final part of the installment of his story. So in the last couple of parts, if you haven't seen it, it's a quick little summary. Arrav was born and found within Zemouragal and ended up having a dream, and within this dream Zemouragal appeared and threatened him. Upon telling this to the elders of Zemouragal, they told Arrav to leave and go in search of a mighty artifact. And in doing so, Arrav then left. He found himself coming across a number of different races and people, and found the Encanto dwarfs, who, upon finding out that Zemouragal had plans for Arrav, also told him to move on. And that's pretty much where we left off. So let's carry on then, shall we? Zemouragal burnt. As Arrav came across the fields to the south of Zemouragal, he saw over the trees a column of black smoke. It was a windless day, and this column, climbing straight and true into the sky, looked to Arrav like the finger of an angry god. He hastened his pace, racing through the forest beyond which lay Zemouragal. A few beasts lunged at him from the surrounding vegetation, but he paid them no heed, swatting claws and teeth back with swift flicks of his powerful hands. As he broke from the forest, he saw that which he feared. Zemouragal was burnt to the ground. A few sturdy posts still stood, though they were charred and splintered. And there, in the midst of the scorched earth and smouldering remains of Zemouragal's fields, Arrav saw that goblins had done this. They were short arrows scattered about, and mismatched plates of armour and rusted mail. Finding the few survivors hidden in the tribe's sacred place to the east, Arrav took the strongest of the men and the swiftest of the boys, and set forth west, to the land that the goblins had claimed dominion over. The men of Zemouragal came upon the village late in the evening, while the goblins were resting after their victory feast. A few were bickering over ownership of a farmer's scythe, several were lying asleep near the fires. There were very few guards, for which Arrav meant to make the goblins suffer. As the men swept out into a wide semicircle about the entrance to the village, lurking beneath the cover of the rocks, Arrav saw from the corner of his eye a glimmer as of steel in the moonlight. He looked across at one of Zemouragal's men who had come with him. The man's eyes were hard and determined, and his teeth were set in a snarl. He was hunched beneath a hanging rock, and in his hand held a dagger taken from the ruins of their town. Through the liquid darkness that stood between them, Arrav saw both man and beast in that body, and his heart fell. Arrav knew that though his people had been wronged, he could not lead an attack on an enemy unaware. He had been raised with honour and pride, and he saw that it would be little more than a slaughter. Then, thinking hard on it, he realised that goblins and men had been killing each other needlessly for the length of history. Motioning to bring his men back to him, he stood tall and raised his voice to the night. "Goblins, hear me! We came upon this night to take a blood revenge for what you have done to our homes and families. But I see now that we are like brothers who have fought for our father's attention." He paused for a moment, waiting for the goblins to quiet themselves from this shock. 3 of the largest goblins came forth from the village gates and walked towards Arrav and his men, stopping only a few yards away. In the tongue of men, broken by the harsh goblin accent, one of them spoke. "We listen, man. What you say? Speak, or kill you like your families." "I suggest peace, brother," Arrav said. His men looked at him with shock and a few curses, but a single glance from Arrav was enough to silence them. No man of Zemouragal could deny their greatest hero's honour or compassion. And even in those days, with those virtues among men. If you will agree to never again attack our human settlements, we shall never again attack yours. We shall share these lands like brothers under the sky." The goblins began to bicker, and as Arrav stood and waited, he watched them bicker as the sun rose, and still bicker as the sun reached its peak. Finally, the smallest of the three goblins stepped forward, and he spoke. "We take your peace, man. We goblin are weak against men, and you men are few against our goblin warriors. Peace is only end to war. Come to our village to trade, and we go to yours. Now leave. We have heads to crack to make peace stick." With that, the goblin turned about and kicked his companion sharply in the shins. As they hopped about, the goblin who had just spoken walked back down to the village and started yelling and waving his fist at those goblins hidden behind fences and clustering in the shade of the buildings. And so, it was that men and goblins came to live in peace, with no wars ever again scarring their relationship. In my days, it is not uncommon to see humans go to visit the goblins, and some few goblins come to the market to trade. Despite his victory over savagery and barbarism, Arrav returned to Avaroka to rebuild with a weight in his heart, for he knew that his curse was not yet lifted, and that Zemouragal was still out in the world, plotting destruction of Avaroka. And he knew that Zemouragal would accept no peace. The curse renewed. Avaroka was rebuilt, and before 3 summers had passed, it was again a bustling town. Merchants, no longer afraid of goblin raids, brought 3 times as many goods to the markets, and bards came from across the human lands to see the man who had brought peace with the goblins. Arrav, for his part, was restless. Each night he would look to the sky for portents, signs that his doom was upon him. He knew that should he see those signs, he must flee from his home to save it. Each night he would watch the skies and the stars, noting movements in the darkness, comets, the flight of birds. Then, just as he was forgetting his fate with time, 2 years since the peace was struck with the goblins, Arrav dreamt once again of the dark and sinister figure. In the middle of a field of dream-black wheat, beside a river of ghostly water, Zemouragal came to him. Once more, the Marjara was clad in black. Black greaves upon his legs and black gauntlets covering his hands.
"You have failed, Arrav."
Zemouragal spoke with a voice made of 1,000 whispering blades.
"I will come to Avaroka and destroy it. There will be no tears for this town, for I shall lay waste to all mankind. You upstarts will see the elder race return to claim its dominion. My legion shall blot out the horizon on all sides, and you shall be the last to see the light. This I promise you."
Arrav opened his mouth to speak, but only spiders came out. They ran across his face, biting, scalded down his chest and over his arms. The mute horror consumed him, and he woke with a scream. Those few of the elders that had escaped the destruction of old Avaroka heard the scream, and they knew that Arrav would leave them. In the morning, all rose to seek him out, but his hut was empty. He took nothing with him save his armor and his weapons. His home was as if Arrav had merely gone out to hunt. The elders were afraid now, and talked amongst themselves about the danger of Arrav's destiny, of the need to find help from old allies. they send out their scouts to seek the counsel of the dwarfs and the men of far-flung towns. The shield given. For Arrav, though, the path was clear. He ran for 6 days, resting only for moments to drink water and eat hard bread, turning his course to the Imcando. There, he knew, was the only hope he had, and Avaroka could ever dream for. At the end of the 6th day, he stood before the Imcando chief, close to collapse, and asking for their help. "Wise friend, I have again dreamt of Zemouragal, and now he promises to destroy not only my home, but all my people, wherever they may be." The chief raised his hand in silence to Arrav. "Arrav, we know of your fate, and we know that the enemy is rising. Our sages have felt the emanation of darkness from the north. In the flames of the sacred forge, they have seen the futures. And only a single path is open to us. Once the enemy is done with man, he will turn his gaze on the dwarfs, and we shall be swept aside and completely annihilated. The shield shall be yours, for you are the only one who can stop his evil." With that, Arrav straightened himself and rose to his full height. Arrav saw his nobility and brought forth the shield. Though it looked to Arrav like any other, the Imcando could see the mingled metals and the enchantment it held. Arrav held it before him and hoped to see what the dwarfs could see. The Imcando chief stepped forward, barely up to Arrav's waist, and explained. "The spells of the shield shall protect you from any magics the Mahjarah can summon. This is why Zemouragal wants it. If he could possess it, he could defeat any of his tribe. The Mahjarah are a solitary and jealous race, and always desire to topple each other, to enslave one another. Take this shield with you, and Zemouragal shall have no power over you." Arrav hefted the shield onto his arm, bowed, and then left. Arrav's fate fulfilled. Knowing the fate of his home was in the air, Arrav sped as quickly as he could to return. The people of Avaroka had not been quiet in this time, and when he arrived at the gates, he saw 100 soldiers from across the human lands. Within the walls, 24 dwarves clad in thick armour waited, hefting axes and hammers. All about him, work was underway to fortify the town. Arrav went straight to the hall of the elders, and came to them with the shield before him. "I have returned with the shield of Imcando, which shall be the undoing of Zemouragal," he said. "His spells shall be destroyed by it, and I shall bring the wrath of my sword to his throat. Man need not fear, for where I tread shall be waste to our foe and a paradise to our people." The elders clustered a moment, talking in whispers they did not wish Arrav to hear. In time, the eldest raised his head to speak.
"Arrav of Avaroka, we see that you have faith in our gods, and in the strength of your arm. But what descends upon us is greater than any army any of our histories tells us of. This morning our scouts returned to speak of the horde in the north, numberless. The dead have risen and march this way. They scar the soil and burn the forests, and by the morning their plague will be upon the walls, Avaroka. We trust in you, but you must make haste to prepare for war."
Arrav was tired from his journeys, but he knew his elders spoke the truth. Taking only the briefest of rests, he took all the men and women of Avaroka and armed them in what ways he could. Pitchforks, sticks, spades became swords and spears of his defense. The soldiers that had come from afar knew their duties. The archers were lined upon the walls. The dwarfs dug ditches beyond the walls and erected hasty obstacles to slow the undead army. All night the town prepared. But as the sun rose, all hearts fell. From horizon to horizon stretched a mighty shadow, moving and writhing like a living beast. Arrav could see at the head the tall, dark shape of Zemouragal. His eyes were pits of smouldering coal, and black smoke and snakes of blood twisted in the air about him. Not 100 yards from the walls, the shuffling skeletons and zombies stopped in their advance. Zemouragal stepped forward and raised his eyes to where Arrav stood and laughed. In the skies above, nightmares of flame and dust took shape, spinning about in the air before swooping down upon the defenders. 100 arrows shot into the air only to pass through the phantoms charred and broken. As they struck, a dozen men fell dead. They tumbled from their posts, with ashen faces and gashes across their flesh. Where they struck at Arrav, though, they screamed and faded, settling into the air like ash on a breeze. Arrav roared in his defiance across the field and leapt down to face the Majara's army. As one, the undead lurched forwards, arrows falling upon them like rain. Nothing could slow its advance. Though, as the defenders watched, their comrades rose from the ground to strike at those who were once their friends. Each man who fell rose once more, swinging twisted blades and shattered limbs. Arrav stood among the walking dead as a warrior of the gods. Nothing could come close to him without being cut down. Those that he struck with his blade did not rise again, and soon the bodies started to pile high around him. He leapt forward into the midst of Zemouragal's army, hacking a path to the sorcerer behind him. Avaroka put up a bold defense, but the edges of the town were already alit, and mobs of the dead were roaming the streets unhindered. Only at blockades and fortified houses were the humans and dwarfs slowing their advance. Arrav, though, finally broke from the army and looked upon Zemouragal. The Majara was not as tall as Arrav, but in his hand held a sword made of shadow and smoke. "Your doom is upon you, foolish weakling," Zemouragal said. "Your shield may save you from my magics, but your home will be drowned in blood. Even now, your people are being slaughtered and shall rise again as my slaves. And now, standing before me like a belligerent child, you shall feel the might of my arm." With that, Zemouragal leapt forwards with a speed that Arrav has never seen before. Though Zemouragal's body was thin, each time he parried a blow, Arrav felt a superhuman strength behind it. It was all he could do to just defend himself. And Arrav had not the time to think of launching his own attacks. Behind them, in the distance, Avaroka was fallen. Realizing the fate of his people was not entwined in his own fate, Arrav paused. The sorcerer's sword slipped behind his guard and cut deep into Arrav's thigh. Zemouragal laughed all the louder then, and threw his hood back. A skull with burning sockets looked out upon the wasted fields, and where his gaze fell, there was nothing but death and evil magics. Arrav looked down upon his shield, unblemished from any blow, and saw the truth of his path. Running back towards the town, he took the edge of the shield into his hand and threw it as a man might throw a stone to skim upon water. It flew through the air and landed in the midst of the burning buildings. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a mighty sigh, all the dead within the walls crumbled to dust. Fires dulled, and the nightmares of the air screamed their last. A few men looked out from behind barricades, and the dwarfs rose from a crater of bodies to see what had happened. A young man, not more than 16, was stood in the street, holding the shield. Arrav recognized the man immediately. It was the grandson of the elder who had spoken to him the night before, a man of honor and compassion. Before he could think further, a blast of sorcerous energy struck Arrav in the back. Zemouragal stood over him as he crawled through the dust and mud, crippled with pain.
Fool!
The Majra said in a hiss.
You have surrendered yourself to save your home, but nothing can protect you from me. In time, I will return. The decades pass like moments for those of my tribe, and nothing can defy our will for all time. For when I return, you shall lead my armies. You shall be the greatest champion. You shall suffer with the knowledge that though you hope to save your people, you instead be their doom.
Tendrils of oily smoke crept from Zemouragal's hands and twisted over the broken ground to Arrav, clutching him tight within their grasp. For a few moments he struggled against their power, but finally he was still, pale and quiet. Arrav, the greatest hero of men, was dead. We remember Arrav for his sacrifice. We remember that his fate was not of his choosing. And we remember him as an example to us all. For though he was stronger and faster than any other mortal, his strength of spirit, his compassion, can be that of any man. We remember Arrav, too, because we must always be prepared for his return, as sad a meeting though it shall be. So that is the end of Arrav's legend. That is the actual official legend of Arrav. So it is pretty impressive. It's a nice little story. Gives you some very nice information on the background and kind of shows you what another Majra did back in the day. So we covered a few of them. And, well, conveniently enough, Majra are coming up as a new lore showcase soon, so seems quite nice. So you've just learned about Arrav and the fact that he struggled against the destiny, and he's kind of like the hero to all mankind, and he's used as an example, as well as remembering that he is also still a threat because of Zemouragal's antics. So there we go. I hope you all enjoyed the legend of Arrav. And until next time, people, I will catch you all later. Have a good one.